I have it all nice and pretty for you, and it's simple. But what I'm going to share with you guys today is the rough draft. So we'll have that formalized and ready for probably by Monday for Alice for the board meeting. All right. So I think, let me see. Oh, no. I agreed to
Yeah,
be
one
live.
second.
Yep, you're good.
I just got to figure out where okay, maybe it's not going to make me mute. Sometimes it does it automatically.
All right, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Hey,
Okay.
Nikki.
Hi. Sorry about that.
Thank you for joining.
Thanks for letting me.
You've got the lineup. It's a pretty simple meeting as far as it's a sort of a special meeting, out of cycle meeting to work on the budget or to get some budget in, get us levelized on some budget stuff that we're going to want to present to the board next week. So we are happy to have you. And Shanika, I'm making you a host, which means I think you can share that.
Oh, yes. Okay. That works.
Okay.
So let me.
Good.
And it always takes me a minute to figure out what I'm sharing. Oh, the tab up at the top. Got to love it. It's right under the tab I need. Oh,
I know. Okay.
it's right there. That's the one. Okay. All right. There we go. Finally able to get to it. Okay.
Got it.
So you guys are seeing, I know I probably need to make that a little bigger. Is that
No,
better?
that's fine.
Okay. So in this budget, and Alice, after tonight, I'll share this to the board drive. So you have access to it, and then I will make the pretty version for presentation with that side by side that we like to use from the current budget to the proposal for next year. So I'm actually going to show you the side by side. I think that will be
that's
easier.
the best way. It's all out of context without something.
Yeah. So don't close your eyes while I scroll up to the top here. Okay. All right. And this is the detailed line item budget. So this will also be provided to the board. And Alice, is this the one you have to share on the screen? Is the detailed one next week, or is it which one?
Possibly, yeah. I think what I'll probably ask as you go through this is assumptions, like the state funds look to be flat. So are we assuming the same per student reimbursement?
Okay.
You know what I'm getting? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I can provide all of those notes as well. So I'll have a document that's kind of like your working document with notes and things.
Okay.
And everything feeds back to a tab in the but it's further on into the spreadsheet. So revenue is generated by this tab here, which has the calculation of the number of students.
Okay.
And then it all cycles back around they all speak to one another. So with the revenue, so what I've done, and I'm sorry, I'm going to have to move y'all's heads so that I can see what I've done here. Okay. So we have the current budget to the left with the proposed budget to the right. Alice, you're right on it about the revenue funds. We were fortunate enough this past year with our state funds where the state paid us the higher of our ADM actual number of students, or if we had projected, whichever number was higher. So last year we projected the 630. And so with that gave us this local fund number. So basically it's the same because that's our projection for next year as well. And actually, Alice, you know what? Not an issue.
I was going to say, aren't we forecasting more students next year?
Well, 648 is what we're forecasting. And
Okay. But that's not what we had this year, right?
we had 630. So there's not,
Oh, you're right. Okay.
because we were paid at the higher rate.
Right.
We were paid for more than what we actually received. So it didn't really change our revenue income for this year.
Gotcha.
But I have an issue with the budget. So we're going to pretend like we didn't see that issue, and I'll fix it in a few minutes.
Okay. That's fine.
We're not going to pretend. I'm going to fix it. Because what I had projected, anyway, I have a higher projection. So my intent was to project it at 1.5% higher over last year. And I spoke with Nigel and asked his feedback on that. And he thought a 1.5% increase on the state and local fund, and that's the only place I did it, was state and local funds. He said that that was a conservative increase. This past year, we received a 2% increase. Because we're considered a high wealth district. So we didn't receive the bump that a lot of the other districts received this year with their funding. So I feel that the 1.5% is a conservative number. I historically like to leave it flat, just in case for some reason we don't receive additional revenues. But that's trying to get the budget where we needed it to be. I did the 1.5%. However, what you're seeing right now is it's flat. So that might help with
The gaps we're
the
looking
gap
at. Yep.
that we're looking at. Yep. So I will do some math on that in just a minute. So I'm glad
That's fine.
sure what happened there. So what we have is our state, local, and federal funding. I left federal funding flat because they're typically a year behind. We have an increase in our federal students that qualify for these funds, but it's usually a year and a half back as the count that they use. So we won't see those funds really reflected into our budget until next year. So there likely will be an increase, but that one is not as easy or as simple to predict. And so that's the reason why I left the federal funds flat. We had extra funding this past year. If you notice over here on the left-hand side, the reimbursement, well, I'm sorry, something is really off because we had more federal funds than last year too. I'll figure it out. We had almost $700,000 in federal funds this year, which is not reflective right here.
Yeah.
And so I decreased that amount over here on this side, and somehow it also affected my column over here, which is where I think some of my issues are coming in. So we will get that. So the federal funding doesn't have all of those ESSER funds that we received this year, which has impacted our funding for this year as well, for the upcoming year. So I left annual funds, miscellaneous revenue. I left all of that the same.
Okay.
The student supplies was the budget that was given for the technology fee that we were charging students in the past for the use of a device. We're not allowed to charge that.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
Okay.
It can be a donation or
Okay.
but it can't be a required fee. And so I've taken that out of our revenues for this year. And then for the next line, so for clarity, we're not allowed to charge a fee that our local district doesn't charge. Prior to COVID, Wake County would charge a laptop expense fee. But with ESSER funding that Wake County received, they no longer pass that expense down to their students. And so that's the reason why we have to remove.
Got it.
So we didn't do anything wrong in the past. It just as
something changed.
Something changed.
Gotcha.
So for our past budget, we had the reimbursement for the bonds, which was the $655,000. We're going to carry it over, and we have to change the terminology of it. We're going to call it use of prior year funds. All this number is right here is what is remaining of these prior year expenses or building expenses.
Reimbursed expenses, right?
And those are earmarked later on in the budget for asset expenses, for the continuation of purchasing the furniture, fixtures, and equipment for the new building. So those have been accounted for as a part of the expenditures that are assets, so that Nigel has them calculated properly.
Okay.
All right. So per our conversation before, I removed the child care line item, this one right here. So for this year, it was 174,000. We're going to have a separate budget for the before and after school daycare. So it will have its own expenditures and its own budget. So it's been removed from our budget for this year. But we do have, thankfully, our preschool, which per Nigel as well is okay to leave in this budget. And it's, you know, quadrupled in size.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it is where we want it. I believe we have 31 students in the program now, with some on the waiting list. So it's doing well. We do have quite a few that are doing the half-day program. If for some reason they decide to do the full day program, that number will of course increase. So that is how we get to our revenue tab. And I'm seeing here that the numbers are more accurately reflected than they are over here on the left. So I'm not really sure, but I will go back. And I was so worried about these line items, these expenses. Yeah. Go check my formulas.
Yeah, just tune it up and I'll look at the final version. That's great.
So if we're comparing side by side from what we've done this year to what we're doing next year with our salaries, we do have an increase in the benefits and in the retirement. And then we also have the salaries. And I had the formula over here, the vaccine, the bonus match,
the
and
bonus based on vaccine. Yep.
All of that's being taken out. So we've zeroed that out.
Gotcha.
Then what I did down here for the actual budget, I'm looking, I removed the workbook column because that should all be included into the instructional material items here. And I also removed the classroom setup equipment and furniture because I'm covering all
from
of
scratch
that
this year. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Good.
So that will all be covered with the bond. So I modified that budget here for this line, for this particular line item. I also reduced the media center budget because in the past, apparently, this budget was intended to cover some software. But I'm actually repurposing software should go under our technology budget, not specifically to the media center. So I reduced, so they have $2,000 to spend on books that she wants to use in the media center. So I didn't necessarily cut her budget. I'm just reappropriating how it's being designated. On the instructional technology budget, this was the budget that's been there all year, but we have not needed to spend that much money. And so I have modified that. So our contracted services, that is our Steve Joyner contract. And then I pared back the miscellaneous computers. This is intended to cover things such as cracked screens when we need to replace a screen, or just miscellaneous supplies like plugs, HDMI cords, or power cords, things like that. And we just, once we went one-to-one, our devices are fairly new, and we have not needed that type of budget for this year. And I don't anticipate that we'll need it for next year either. So I've greatly cut that budget by $30,000 for this upcoming year. Professional development, we reduced to $20,000. We had increased professional development with our revised budget. We just haven't been spending it. I think a lot of that is everything's being done virtually now. People aren't traveling. And so this is a conservative number, I think, for next year.
Okay.
This is awesome.
Could you go back to technology for 1 second? Just I was fiddling with the live stream. So tell me one more time what caused that drop. I'm sorry.
We're not spending it.
Okay. Okay. So you're just based on history.
Based on history and the status of our current devices. We do not need to purchase student devices or teacher devices. And we're going to have brand new televisions in the building. So there's no need for projectors. So so much is being provided with the new construction that I just don't anticipate us. This is basically a repair budget. If something winds up damaged or needs to be replaced. And for this coming year, and also trying to cut back where I could, this is just, it's not validated to have
Okay.
45,000.
Yep. Now, one thing we might want to look at, but we can go in with this budget, is just a future point, is I know that we were able during COVID to buy a lot of devices and build up an inventory, even enough to cover future students, so to speak.
We did.
But do we want to at some point, and maybe this first year in the building isn't there to do it, but after that, do we want to start sort of replacing the worst, kind of a phased replacement of the worst of the most beat up devices or whatever, so that we don't have a year when we need to buy 800 Chromebooks
at one time? Yes, that's not any fun.
No.
Yes, I would. So we received, I would say, 3/4 of our devices within the last 12 months.
Right.
So with the shelf life or an anticipated life of 3 years, I do think we're probably safe this year, and then moving forward, doing a aside, or working with Nigel and finding out how we can take some of our reserves and set it aside for technology expense only, because it will be quite a penny when they all do need to be replaced.
Yeah, and that's why we were trying pre-COVID to get into a routine where we replaced something like a third of the fleet every year. So we just had a flat annual expense, as opposed to having zero a bunch, zero a bunch.
Yep.
Because it's hard to absorb those bigger numbers. So
the school connectivity grant that we've received 3 rounds of it. And so the first round is what topped us off with the devices that we needed for next year, plus a 10% cushion. And then the second round, we purchased hotspots and teacher devices for every teacher. So those are all being replaced. We have not distributed those. Those will go out in the fall. And then the third round, haven't been approved yet, but the third round, what we were going to do is when the teachers got the new laptops, we were going to then give the older laptops to our paraprofessionals, because what they currently have is a Chromebook. So they were then going to get a laptop. So what I'm asking for the third round, and since we got rounds 1 and 2, I don't know if they'll give us round 3 or not. But I've asked for devices so that everybody on campus, no one's working from a Chromebook, and they'd have a brand new laptop. So, and fortunately that hasn't come out from any of our budget. That's just all added, niceness that has come out of COVID. So, and that's the other reason why I think this budget, maybe laptops were intended to have been purchased from this budget. I'm not sure. But we have not needed it this year.
Okay.
So,
great.
Did you catch the professional development?
Yeah, I did catch that. Thank you.
Okay. The contracted services, I left almost flat. I reduced speech services $2,000 just to keep them at around 70. She has not capped out this anticipated spend, and a lot of it will be contingent upon how many students we have next fall that are going to need speech services. That is by far our largest contract. And there has still been conversations as to whether or not she will become a Casa employee and no longer be contracted, or would she continue working as she is now as a contract employee. So I just kept it at 70. It really probably could drop a little bit more, but I didn't feel confident dropping it too much. just because
Sure.
we don't know how many of our new students are going to need those services. So I didn't make much changes there. The before and after school program, I removed this line item altogether because they're going to have their own budget. So they won't have any materials or expenses that could be paid for from the school. I zeroed them out. Now, when it comes to office expenses, trying to streamline the budget and cut it back, this is where I probably made some of the biggest changes. For under advertising and marketing, we had chunked a lot of money towards the marketing supplies to help cover advertising and things like that this year. So I did reduce those numbers, as well as I reduced the hospitality budget, which is thank yous to the staff, meals, that type of thing. And I also reduced the office supply budget, and that covers things like sticky notes and toners for special print. Well, no, not toners, but folders and special items.
Paper,
Well,
pencils, whatever.
paper, yeah, paper actually come out of copying and reproduction. It gets its
Okay.
own whole category down below, but
I see that. Yeah.
the goal, paper clips, staples, that kind of thing. So what I will likely do is, with our surplus that we have this year, at the end of the year, purchase a pretty good supply to get our closet full in June, so I felt pretty confident with knocking down almost $3,000 out of that budget. We can do a nice order and not necessarily need that in our general budget for next year.
Gotcha.
The copying and reproduction, I left that flat. We have gotten a new quote or a new lease for the next 4 years, and it came out the same price. The only difference is that we will have, once we get to the new building and it arrives, we'll have 3 new copiers, 2 which will copy black and white, and 1 that will be in color. But we were able to get all 3 for the same current contract that we have now. That color copier will be in the administrator office. And so if teachers want something to be printed in color, then it would have to go through one of us that have access to the administration copier, because it is more expensive to print.
Oh, yeah. It's the per page cost there that gets you. Yeah.
Yep. All right. And here's the beast.
Yeah.
This is where most of the change has come. And Alice, I'm sorry, I've got so many different line items down here. I'm seeing this doesn't properly reflect all of the changes that I made. I think I did them all in this other budget. That's okay. I can walk you through what I've done. Because we're going to have 2 locations, I've increased our electricity property, or under this category, I've increased our electricity line item an additional $10,000.
Do you think that's enough?
I do, for a few different reasons. One, we just converted to programmable thermostats at Casa. That I plan
that helps a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I plan to, there's only the 3 of us that are going to be there this summer. So there's no need for us to be cooling the entire school this summer. So we'll keep it at about 79 everywhere but where the 3 of us work, which we're all on the same thermostat. So that's
one little section. Gotcha.
Yeah. So I think that's going to be a cost savings there. And it'll also be a cost savings when we move out in October, because there's no need to be, running the heat. And we were filling up the propane tanks every 7 days.
Yeah, I know.
It got crazy there this winter. So I feel like I don't think we're going to have that big of a bill. And then we won't take over the new bill at the new building until October-ish.
And do we
So
have the same gas setup where we have to get propane delivered, or are we on a gas line? We're not. I don't. We are, aren't we? We don't have to do this propane thing anymore, right?
we don't have to do the propane thing anymore, but I'm not sure. Is it because of the gas line or is it all electric? I'm not
I'm not sure either. Yeah,
sure.
that's a great
Um,
question.
Either way, between the two, I think we're pretty safe with 85,000 in utilities for power,
Yep,
power and heat and air.
gas, right?
Mhm. For our rent for next year, for our
So
lease,
we're
our
paying
rent.
1 month in advance in June, right?
So we've actually already cut our check for June, this month in May. And then in June, we'll cut our check for July. So it'll go on this year's budget. And then our landlord has allowed us to also pay one additional month out of our current fiscal year budget in June. So essentially, this calculation here is 4 months of rent to cover the
Yeah,
months August through December, is what this calculation is.
okay,
Our rent, our payment to UMB for our bond
one
changes.
million oh 27. Yep.
It changes this June, and it's a 6 month calculation. So it was like 34,000 from June through December, and then January through June of next year is when it jumped up. So this is the total that we're expected to pay for next year. And then
Okay.
our rental for the middle grades for the first 6 weeks is going to be 18,000. Now, if we move out before then, I don't anticipate it, but this is
Yep.
our capped price is what we're looking at.
Gotcha.
So that brings total
So
property
there's
lease.
where that's where the biggest expense increase is, really.
Yeah, if I didn't have this here, I wouldn't have any heartache. No heartburn.
Right.
All right. Telephone I kept flat. I don't know who our new service provider is going to be. But I would anticipate that our prices shouldn't change much. At least for the first year. We'll get some kind of new promo special for that first year.
Right. I suspect you're right. Yep.
And so when I told you I have some stuff in some wonky places, you're about to start seeing it.
Okay.
Because under janitorials where I have our savings account. So for janitorial supplies over here on this current year's budget, I had custodial supplies and janitorial supplies. That's the same thing. So I have combined them on the next budget. It's just $14,000, and that's trash bags, toilet paper, that kind of thing. And then our garbage disposal, I do know I have confirmed that we're keeping our same vendor, and so we're just going to transfer there will be a crossover at some point because we'll need a trash dumpster at both locations for a small period of time. But he said our pricing and everything would not change just because we had relocated. So you do see here where I had to do a line item somewhere. I was trying to get all my formulas to match up before, where I put our savings here of 1.5% of the budget is what I went with to get us where we're at the bottom line when we get down to the bottom.
Got you. So that is really just saying that 104,000 is our 1.5% of our annual revenue, or that we are required to show to have as a positive bottom line for the bonds, right? Okay.
Yeah, and so
by treating it as an expense, we cover it,
right? And so, like over here on the left-hand side, and we're getting close to the bottom. So what we had done this past year, we had this huge surplus, that was actually reflected in the budget, which we're not doing this year. We're treating it as an actual line item.
Right.
And when you actually see the other budget summary, I put it where it needed to go, but in this line by line, I didn't make them pretty.
Mhm.
I
Okay.
tell you, it's not a pretty budget. It's really not right now.
No,
Okay.
I know what you're working through the details, and then we can roll it up. So that doesn't worry me too much. Gotcha. I see you added lawn care, which is true for a new space.
I did, and this is a guesstimate. I really don't know. Now, the glorious part about this is that we'll be through the heat of the summer, and we shouldn't need
Right.
a lot of lawn care maintenance October through February-ish. So if for some reason they come back and say it's a 50,000 a year contract, we'll already be into the year, and
It'll
make
be
it
only
work.
25 or something. Yeah, right.
Yeah, we'll make it work for the next budget.
Well, we will hope as well that we just don't have a lot of snow removal.
Well, now I will tell you, like I've told everyone else about snow removal, is that schools don't go to school when it's snowing. So
Yeah.
we're gonna
Snow removal is sun, right?
that's not a expense. That's
A big deal. Yeah.
that's a burning money kind of expense. So I don't ever advocate for that. Salting and preparing the sidewalks, things like that, absolutely. But
Yeah.
I've been burned a few times with some snow removal, and then we didn't go to school for a week. So
Right.
And buddy, they'll offer it too. Let me clear out those. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
sorry.
Let me get that
soapbox.
parking lot ready for you to
Yeah.
use, right?
I promise you, we're not coming in. Okay. Alarm system. This is one area that is a nice savings for us. I don't know what the current, we're paying a lot for our current alarm system. And when we move, we won't take the same provider with us. We will go with a different contract. So I have some preliminary, of course, they don't want to quote services until we actually move in. But the 1,500 for that service is fairly accurate. And because we're one building, which we are one building now, but because we'll be one building, that means we only need one system. So that's helpful.
Right. Good.
Maintenance supplies and materials, and then you also see building repairs. I did not put anything in the building repair line item, and I cut the budget in half. So I just feel like brand new building, if we've got that many expenses for the brand new building, then we've got other concerns that need to be addressed with BCCG.
We need to figure out why. Yep.
Exactly. So I didn't want to just cut the budget, entirely, because I think that would be foolish, but I did in one place where I felt like we could scale back for this coming year. It was here. Also for fire drills, no cost for that, because in the new facility, it will be our facility, and we won't have to pay a service fee for someone to conduct the fire drills for us. So I've removed that expense, and I drastically cut the HVAC expense. Our system should be under warranty at the new school. However, in speaking, I left a budget simply because when I spoke with Monica Cutno, she said that the HVAC was a nightmare for them the first year that they were in the building. And it was everybody pointing fingers at who was responsible.
Right.
And she said, eventually just fix. She just went and got her own service provider and had them fix it. So
right.
Hopefully that won't be our concern, but I didn't want to just bank on it's covered under the contract. And leave at least a little bit of a buffer there just in case. I'm not planning on replacing anything
Let's
next
hope
year.
that just becomes cushion, but good to have. Right.
And then I reduced the playground as well. The playground really probably could go down to zero, just because it will most likely be covered under the FFE budget. But, a little bit of cushion just in case maybe the current facility for some reason needs something.
Cool.
While we're there for those 6 weeks.
Excellent.
All right. And then the lawn care contract. So here you go. This is where, probably not the best place last year where I put this, but this is where I put the administrator contract last year.
Yep.
I'm gonna have to put it somewhere. Right now, it's currently looped under salaries, and I'll find out from
Yeah.
Nigel like the best category to
Right.
call it.
I don't know if it would
Um,
go into the student services or not. It's really not directly to students. So,
I think maybe there should be a line item that says contracted services,
Mhm.
or maybe change this from saying insurance and financial to contracted services, because that's really more along the lines of what this is.
Right.
And maybe still lump it under this category.
Okay.
So that's going to be the biggest difference in these two at this point in time, is that it does not have that category for the administrator contract. Everything else I kept pretty flat,
Mhm.
except for we are getting quotes for our liability insurance and our property insurance and workers' comp. So I already have one, the bids are due June 1. I've already gotten one of them, and it was already less than what we were currently paying. So I went ahead and plugged
Great.
in those numbers. Where it was not Star Road, it was
Mhm.
tremendously less than what we're currently paying if I'm
Great.
comparing apples to apples. However, we'll have to add Star Road, which changes the type of insurance we get when it goes from being a leased property to it's our property. So of course the numbers dumped. And then also
Mhm.
I basically had them do a worst case scenario. So this is worst case scenario. These numbers could go down, obviously, if the other
Mhm.
two vendors come back with less expense. But this, in general, these are pretty comfortable numbers. It could be less. The ProLiant contract I also put under here, and that is the new payroll HR system
Right.
we'll
Right.
bring on July 1.
Awesome.
So that's accounted for as well. Under human resources, I reduced those expenses. Just trying to
Mhm.
cut numbers a
Tighten
little
up a
bit.
little bit. Yep.
I will say that for the note that I have here, we spend a lot of money on background checks for volunteers,
Yes.
a lot of money. It is my recommendation, and we don't have to just, depending on where the budget lands, but we spend almost like $6,000 to $8,000 on volunteer background checks. And we spent that this year without allowing volunteers into the building. I feel fairly confident that next year we're going to allow volunteers in the building, because the COVID world is changing, and
Yeah.
we're getting more comfortable with bringing people on. But I feel like we should only be paying for the background checks for our staff members. And so
if
it's
someone wants to volunteer, would you then suggest that they have to pay a fee to
so they
apply?
can go to the exact same website so that we have access to it. And that's the way it's set up now. If they want to volunteer, then they have to pay for it now, because they've missed the window for Casa to pay for it. We left the window open for like a month. So I just recommend that we change. If we leave it open, maybe I don't know, we pay for the first 100 people. I don't know.
Yeah, it was always kind of, there was a brief period at the beginning of the school year, and then after that it was, that's all we can handle. So I don't dislike that idea. I think that's probably a good.
I don't want to leave it as a blank check, and that's kind of
right.
So I think we need to tighten that down. So I also think we should probably look at some new vendors. I have one contact that can do it for less than what we're currently paying now. I just haven't talked with the finance committee to find out if there's any connection there that I need to be cognizant of.
I doubt there is. I don't know of any, but
okay,
we can ask. Yep.
So I do recommend that we get some pricing on that and see if there's some savings there. And if there are, if we can cut the price into half or a third, then
all the more reason to let them still pay for it themselves. Just be more economical.
Now they get 2 for the price of 1.
Right.
I did not change anything on the immigration sponsorship line item. I think we're going to have more than 3 this year. However, the savings, and I did work in the contract, the proper wording about not paying for retirement and benefits because that's provided through the
Right.
sponsorship. It's a wash. So it's
Great.
not I don't know how many we're hiring. At this point, we've only hired
Yep.
2. I anticipate 3. But budget wise, it should not impact us. Our audit services are reflected here. I left all of that flat as well.
Yeah, but remember the quote we got from the auditors was up quite a bit.
23 or
Yeah,
21.5.
something like that. I want to say 20. I remember them saying they made a big deal about why it increased. So,
and I had put unbeknownst to me when we did the budget back in February, we had double paid for something. So I had increased this to 20 before.
Oh, that's right.
And we didn't actually need the 20. So,
yeah.
I will
so the
go
20
back.
may be just fine, but yeah, we need to just double check. Yeah.
I'll increase that number because it is more than 20, but I don't remember.
Yeah.
For board expenses and development and fundraising, I dropped those budgets because nobody's spending those funds.
Okay.
Unless, and this is where I lean on you, do you guys,
Yeah.
when you do your retreat and stuff, is there?
I mean, at the most we've had dinner, it's not been a huge thing.
Okay.
The only thing the only thing I did mention from a development point of view was sometime early in the new building, I think we should have a fundraising oriented open event at the school to kind of show the school off. But, I hate to sound like a political party, but I don't know that we could be able to convince people we could have a $500 a plate dinner. But if we could have something that maybe costs, 70 or 50,
50? Yeah,
a family or a person that is, kind of a tour and see the new space and
I
help
agree.
us. So
I agree.
But that would then come with some more revenue. So
right. And if you knew you had a starter budget to pay for some of your expenses or your advertising, that kind of thing, then I feel like this would be a good place to start. And someone asked me about that, we're going to do some of our fundraising, our Mariposa and all that kind of stuff. And I said, yes, once we get into the building, then I'll be able to transfer some of my attention to the fundraising.
Right. Right.
And
I know John has
effort.
some, thoughts too on things we should be doing in the fundraising space. So we might get some pressure to take that back to 5, but we'll see what happens.
And I think we'll be okay,
Yeah, right.
All right. So then under the miscellaneous, I left all of that flat as well, except I took out the marketing contract.
Okay.
And that was when Miss Connor and I were trying to, one point went with my original budget with her last week. We took out the marketing contract at that point in time, to get us to zero, really. And it's still out for now.
Okay.
So this line here, asset expenses, is a
okay, that's the other side of the 261 in revenue. Gotcha.
In revenue. And then here is the bond reserves that are required for us to have that 1.1%. So they were just line items.
And we're required to have 1 point. Oh, that's 1 point. So you're trying to get to, that's the 1.1 of the payment. The 1.1 coverage ratio. Okay. And then you're trying to get to a essentially net zero or very close.
Right.
Right.
And so the last thing that I did before for my most recent conversation with Nigel, I had worked with Miss Connor because Nigel said that we needed another $31,000 to make budget.
Right. I remember that version of the emails. Yeah.
That was this morning or some point today.
Mhm.
And so we removed an executive administrative assistant position.
I think that's a mistake, but anyway, okay. Yeah. I hope we can have that, but
So that was what we took away.
okay.
We haven't advertised for it. It was something I said we could do, I said, I have 15,000 already. I really only need 19,000 in order to get to the number that Nigel wants us to get at. I said, we could make this person part-time, or we could not hire them and then see where the budget land, hire later in the year. And she said, let's just cut it for now because, Nigel hadn't given his blessing yet on the budget.
Right.
So that's the reason why it's currently at 50. So
Gotcha.
when Nigel's saying that we need 194,000, depending upon what the auditor's comment is, it's not the 260 because I had already cut it as much as I had because I thought I was working towards a different number.
Okay.
So, all of that to say,
so another way to present this is, I'm just thinking out loud about how is to say, we're budgeting revenues of 7.556 and expenses of
7,505.
But take out like the required, I know why you do this for iteration purposes, but take out the required reserve, which is what, 103 or something. So 7,402. And that gives us a positive 180, if my math is right. Which and then we would say, required reserve addition for bond purposes is whatever, and the remainder is our true surplus.
Yes. So the 207,460 Nigel keeps putting together to go towards one of these ratios that he's getting for the bond.
Right.
So that's the 207,460. And then we also have the 50,000 already that's over here. So we're at 250. Yeah. 258 is about what we're
does
at.
The 207, I could look at my email, but does the 207 give us the 1.1 coverage ratio?
It does. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Unless we have to count the 300,000 that we would be getting for the lease for January through May, January through June. If we can't count that as revenue, but it counts as an expense, and now we have to do its cover ratio on it, which was the reason why I was trying to come up with 31,000. Because he was saying I now had to include it. Right. But then he took away my asset line items. So
right.
It's like I'm back to ground zero. So this is the actual summary that I was putting together that is just this year's budget, so it's going to be better reflective. So what I need to do is confirm that my revenue calculations came over properly, because this is flat and I did increase it 1.5%. So I need to fix those numbers and double check. I'm just going to do a quick calculation to see what 1.5% even is. Times 1.5, $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
So that could go a long way with that position that we cut. If all of the other things work out that Nigel has proposed that we pursue. So I'm not sure how so Nigel said to present this budget. I'm going to go back and double check my revenue numbers and see what that does. But Nigel
now this
said
budget only does not have January through June rent, right? For the current space.
This one does. This one that I'm on
Okay.
right now. This one does. You'll see it. I didn't have it in the side by side because it really hasn't been the one I've been working from. See it right here. It says bond proceeds to cover the lease under revenue.
Oh, okay. So it has both the rent and the bond proceeds.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then when I come down here under the property lease, see, this isn't 13,000 or 1.3, it's 1.6.
Gotcha.
So it washes out because
Right.
I wasn't going to put it in the budget, and I just said I had to.
So we have to, and I think what he's getting at is we have to leave the 1.6 if we think we're going to pay 12 months rent and take out the 300,000. And that's where we start going negative.
Mm-hmm. With our
Yep.
ratio.
Right.
And I think that's probably the most frustrating thing is that we have the money in the bank, like.
Well, that's kind of why I'm anxious to settle this
Mm-hmm.
one way or another, no matter what. But I also feel like a candid conversation with our investors, reminding them of all the cash we have would, essentially say to them, listen, yeah, we're not quite meeting the ratio, but look at all the other strengths we have. So,
And Alice, I have asked Nigel, I'm sure he probably thought, Lord, this woman is going to swindle somebody out of something. Because I've asked all kinds of, well, can I take from my money that I have in the bank and pay for this? Or can I pay for that? Or, like, how can I reappropriate? So can I prepay for stuff? And I think probably one of the frustrating things for me is if I can't spend the money that's in the bank,
what's the good point? What good is it? Yeah, right.
What's the point in carrying over money from year to year other than then maybe we should operate it so tightly that it's only meeting the bond covenant. Or maybe that's where we use our money for our technology, or like, when do we ever have permission to spend that fund?
I think that's a fair question. I got to think on that. Because we've been really good about, we used to just, spend it and show it. And we were thrifty enough that we could, we always ended up with something close to a positive bottom line.
The CSP's response was, you can use prior year, kind of like what we're doing with that prior year fund line item.
Yeah.
You can use up to 10% of your budget for prior. You can go into the negative 10%, but be paying from your prior year funding.
Right. And that's all fine except for ratios.
That's fine for DPI. That's fine for, but as long as you can explain what it was for, except for the bond. That's where the bond wants us to show more revenue coming in this year than expenses for I guess our next 35 years. So or as long as we're committed to the bond. So that's where it gets frustrating. So I don't know who do we even ask those? Is that a Nigel? Like, how can we spend that money?
I think the first thing we have to do is just get past this hurdle, then have the conversations to understand where the auditors are coming out, so we know exactly how they would do the accounting. And that, because the way they account for it also impacts your ratio, right? Because I think the official ratio filing we do, we'd have to go back and look at UMB's disclosures, but I think it's based on the audited financials, which they're in effect converted to modified cash basis as opposed to pure cash basis. So that's where I'm not 100% clear, honestly, is exactly how do we factor that in or understand what that does to us? And then if after we have some conversation with Trademark and we understand why they're discouraging us from trying to negotiate our way out of the lease, then we just say, okay, what do we think is our best course of action? Is it go back to the investors and say, we don't want to have to spend that whole 2 million if we think we could get a better deal in 6 months.
Right.
But if we do that, we won't be in compliance.
So Nigel's recommendation was not to go ahead and speak with the auditor.
Not right away. Yeah.
But my only issue with that is if we know how she's going to handle the 300,000 from the bond, like if we know how that's calculated, then we don't have an issue if she doesn't count it. I don't remember all the terminology, but if she goes one way, then we're good. And if she goes the other way, then that tells us we need to go to the investors and say,
maybe, right.
So I understand what he's saying. You don't want to like raise any red flags with the auditor, but at the same time, she's holding all the cards.
Well,
and
I don't
doesn't
know
even
that
know
that's
it.
red flag. I mean, I think for her, it's more saying, we're trying to do the right thing here, but we need to understand the accounting.
Yeah.
Essentially,
at this point, the 149,000 is not quite 3 positions. It's like 2.5 positions by the time you do benefits and unemployment and all that. So, if we haven't hired, so we know that now, that's better than,
Hey, Nikki, thanks for joining. You really got dumped in the deep end.
Well, I appreciate you letting me listen.
No worries.
All right. Good luck.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, you too.
So yeah, I think we just need to, I think we just need to work through these issues. But in the meantime, come up with a budget that is a good operating budget to start with. And then over the June, July, August time period, hope that we can work through a lot of this. And then I honestly think some of this will get a little easier when we get to day 20, when we get state reimbursement levels confirmed and local reimbursement levels confirmed. In the past, it's always been that we've felt tight at the start of the year and kind of felt like we had a lot of potential expenses that maybe we didn't fully budget for, but we get more upside changes than downside changes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So a combination of a little of that plus working through these 2 or 3 issues, the accounting, then we will, I think we will wrestle this down, but it's probably a now to fall wrestling act.
Well, and revised budgets are the name of the game, right?
Exactly.
If it changes too much.
I'll remind the board, normally we always would revise the budget. I think I've told you this. When we had a solid ADM number and a solid reimbursement number, that was usually one revision. And then usually another one in the February, March timeframe, just based on spending patterns and kind of almost a cleanup revision that just kind of gets your line items straight so you can manage the rest of the year on track.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, all right. Well, so where do we, so what's the next step? Is Nigel working on something or do I need to be asking?
I think we're on a little bit of a pause right now.
Okay.
Because of our vacations and everything. So I think we need to you need to focus. Tomorrow's your last day in the office. So do what you can on this budget. Text me if you need me to jump on a call or something. If it rains like it's supposed to tomorrow, I will be home all day probably. I mean, I might run an errand or two, but okay. I'm not planning on, we were going to play golf, but at 90% chance of rain, probably not.
Somebody should create an indoor golf course.
Yeah, give me access to everything. And then I will review everything and kind of get my head around it with the notes I have
Okay.
and be prepared to present it on Thursday.
Okay. And
Go
I'll
ahead.
put notes. I'll create one that says
Yeah.
like Alice version
Okay, that's fine.
and have notes out there too.
And I think I think I can cover this pretty well. And then I'll probably have a slide that says, here's our exposures or open issues that we need to resolve. But our recommendation at this time is from an operational point of view, this is a good budget. We should approve it. It'll fly. It'll be acceptable to DPI.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if we have to deal with a ratio problem, we'll revise it.
Okay.
But we're hoping that we have a couple ways to deal with the ratio problem that are not, won't require significant budget revisions.
Okay. Okay. And just on the back end, just in case it does require significant revision, I'll get with Miss Connor and see, what would she modify? If we had to modify 2 or 3 positions, what would it be?
In all honesty, I really hate doing the positions, but if we have to, it's good to have the list. But I honestly, at this point, I didn't see many other places I would just, if anything, I think we're a tiny bit optimistic,
Mm-hmm.
So, we kind of don't have that, oh boy, I didn't know this would cost so much in the new space. We don't have much to cover that. So,
no. So we're going to be fine.
I know. No, I know we'll work through it. We have the people to keep an eye on things, but
I will say
and then I agree with you that it's a very fair question of what's the value of all the cash we have if we can't ever pull it in to help cover an expense.
I did tell Miss Connor, because she was asking about something about the building, and I said, the building is not an issue. I've got money coming out of the ears. And it's designated to the building that can only be spent on the building. And I said, you dream building, you got permission, like, what do you want?
Right.
So I said that I've just got to make this year's budget work. It's just this year. Once we get past the lease, really, this budget is, like you said, right where you guys had anticipated.
And if we
for
get
it to
past
be.
the lease, then that solves one problem. And then we also have a growth path. So we might have a couple tight years here, but and we, the lease is the biggest cause. So the growth path then gives us breathing room. And then hopefully we figure out a way to, I guess we can use that cash for assets. That may be because if we're buying an asset that the auditors would categorize as an asset.
Nigel said anything big that could be depreciated over like a 5-year period. He said, so if you're making a big curriculum purchase or a school bus or playground equipment, and I was like, I don't have anything like that for this year
right now. Yeah, right. We
so
may have there could be some things like if we want, we'd have to look at like if we did solar panels or something. We'd have to look at that and see green power deal in the context of what's the impact to our financials. So,
Yep. So
cool.
All righty.
Well, if I don't talk to you tomorrow, have a good vacation, and I will try not to bug you.
Thank you. And it's not a problem.
I know, but I'm going to do my best to just handle it on your behalf and not screw it up too badly.
I appreciate it, Alice. Thank you so much.
No problem. You bet. Take care.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.